Welcome back to the channel, guys. So we have a quick, I guess you can say, update as far as the economic state of things from a tech perspective when it comes to, just the growing trend of artificial intelligence. It's everywhere. If you don't know anything about it, you've definitely been living under a rock. Apparently, like, artificial intelligence is starting to take over more than just like the white collar jobs that people have been talking about. There's been a rhetoric that the white collar jobs, the ones we go to school for, get our degrees for, all that stuff, are the main jobs that AI is going to remove, which therefore started like a conversation, just a trend of people starting to think that college no longer is relevant. Oh, also to go with that, a lot of companies are also starting to say that they no longer require degrees to get into these jobs anyway. So that's another thing that started making it look like degrees were not valuable. What ended up happening was more and more people started to have the conversation of blue collar work and that it leaves a lot of money on the table, which it does. It started that whole thing of, again, like similar to the Great Migration, which I made a video about. Hopefully I remember, I'll link it in this video. Just like the Great Migration, a lot of people from the South, black folks, left the South over the course of, I want to say, about 5-6 decades, and migrated from the South to primarily the Midwest, where most of our factories in the States are based, but also the West Coast, where I'm from, and the North, but from my perspective, the East Coast, like New York and that area. Similar to that, when the Great Migration led to a huge influx of colored workers primarily flooding those factories, but then the rug was pulled from under those workers, and that created this trend and mindset that black folks in particular have no choice but to compete with our contemporaries in the corporate space. Now we're starting to reverse that, where instead of us competing in the corporate space, because AI is becoming more and more implemented, integrated, and is apparently removing more jobs, in addition to the restructuring because economy, we're reversing it by going back. There's more of a mindset of going back to blue collar, which should be untouchable by AI. We're finding out that's not true. According to this news article, I wish I remembered the website, but I came across a news article. Well, let me rewind. What started this was me being on TikTok, and I came across this clip of Trip Fontaine. If you're familiar with him from the Tonight's Conversation platform, he's a huge fan favorite. I like him as well. Very emotionally intelligent, smart dude, funny, like everything. Solid dude. And he's from Ohio. My family's from Ohio as well. My family's from Cleveland on both sides. And growing up, Cleveland, I've always called my second home. And I always noticed Cleveland always had a lot of factories that weren't active, which contributed to the lack of, I guess you can say, economic prosperity that the city, I guess at one point, was actually experiencing. Very similar to Detroit. Trip is from Dayton, Ohio. So, it's the same thing. They have factories and things there as well. And I remember in the clip where he said it's the same thing, the factories aren't being used, but he went into more detail a little bit and touched on how AI is now being used to strip a lot of black men in that area and in the blue collar field in general, and stripping them of their jobs. Basically, it's hitting us hard. When I saw that, it was like, okay, we already knew that white collar work was going to suffer, but now you're telling me where we were starting to gain the mentality of like, hey, if we can't back out a white collar because we've made too much of an investment in it, then at least for the next generation, next couple generations, we can plant the seed for them to go blue collar, or at least make it so they can be hybrid. Like maybe you start blue collar because you don't need as much debt and the degrees to do it, and then you can pivot to white collar if you want to, and having that broad set of skills will benefit you financially and otherwise. But now we're finding out that the candle's being burnt at both ends. So now it's raising a question. White collar work is already going downhill. People are being laid off in droves. Companies are saying they're restructuring, closing locations, and consolidating business units. All this stuff. Major employers are saying degrees don't matter to them anymore, which makes the rest of us who got degrees like, okay, so why I do all this? Especially for more ethnic people, where that's like tradition, like you have no choice but to go into college, especially if you were forced to go into STEM. Now you can become, say, an engineer, and you don't need an engineering degree. that might bite some people in the butt, and they're probably going to be upset, and I wouldn't blame them. But now we're finding out on the blue collar side, production workers, focusing on production workers, like the assembly line, putting cars together, and all those things that some of our ancestors, some of your grandparents, great grandparents probably were doing that. Now AI is taking over some of those jobs. And now we need to figure out what's going to be, I would say, more so the long-term effect of it, or what the future could potentially look like. It should be no mystery at this point that AI is taking over, because it's allowing companies to meet their demand with much lower costs. The fact of the matter is, when you're an employee, you are a bill to the company. I think I've said this in a prior video, but I don't remember. But well, at least I don't remember if I posted it. I'm pretty sure I've said it. But the whole thing with a job is you are proving whether or not you are a bill worth having. The thing is that AI, the threat of that taking your job is that it's a smaller bill for the same amount, if not more work. So it only makes sense that the companies are going to start taking those jobs away from humans and let technology do everything, and we're just going to be hanging. With all that said, where does that leave the potential jobs in those factories, and maybe even the blue collar universe in mass? The whole thing was, will there be a loss of jobs? Possibly. But one thing that the article emphasized was that some of those jobs will not necessarily go away, but the way those jobs will be constructed or will be conducted will be changed. And it may actually require an education, which is funny because we just confirmed and talked about how white collar work is already going downhill and the demand for degrees is going down. But in the article, it said, like, if you're using AI to do your jobs on the assembly line, you're going to need people who understand basic programming, which is something else we're going to talk about in a different video. People that understand basic programming, basic engineering concepts, all that stuff. So it's like, okay, well, getting a STEM degree would be a good idea then. Whenever something goes wrong, because AI is not perfect, at least not yet, but it's not perfect. Like, even when using ChatGPT, Google's AI service, it says it even right there when you ask a question, and it'll say, I think it's productive AI. It's still like, it is beta phase, or, isn't always right. Even sometimes when I've used ChatGPT in the past. Matter of fact, I made it a point to use AI for the scripts for this batch of videos, and I've had to correct it multiple times when it came to certain names that were brought up. You know what I mean? Like, it's not perfect. So you still need people that, if you're writing code and you use AI to, hey, write a script that'll automate my responses to certain emails that I receive on a daily basis. And you have to double check that code, and you need to understand programming to do it, because if you just take what AI spit out and run with it, you're liable to put out some bad responses or information, which means you still need to understand the principles. Now, could you learn this stuff on your own time? Sure, I did. I learned a good bit of Python and SQL in the MySQL syntax by myself. I didn't go to school for that. My IT management degree is more, what's the word, administrative, I guess. It wasn't technical. So when it came to some of the technical stuff I learned, Linux, Python, MySQL, I learned all that stuff myself and just played with it, made basic games on Python and stuff like that. So you can do it. But again, when it comes to that statement of major companies saying, we don't care about you guys having degrees, we just care about you having experience. Well, look at where we're at now. We already are in an era where if you leave a job, you, in my opinion, you might as well kiss the next year minimum goodbye to landing something. If you land something in less than a year, 6 months, but primarily a year, I consider you very lucky in this market. And I wouldn't be surprised if it takes significantly longer than a year at this point, the way a lot of layoffs are happening still, restructurings are happening, and people still aren't finding jobs. I just saw a post on LinkedIn of a guy saying that I think he finally got picked up by Tesla. I could be wrong, but he finally got picked up for a position, and I think he has an engineering degree. And he was like 500 applications and hundreds of emails and however many interviews and one offer. I'm like, bro, that is too much. That's nuts. And the thing is, we're all competing for the same jobs. When it comes to validating that experience, when you take what the major companies set into consideration or what they claim, it leaves this weird thing. From this point on, especially for those who are already parents, want to be parents, do you still intend to push your kids to get degrees? Do you intend for them to just learn the skills, over the years as they are in your household and you're grooming them, you're rearing them and raising them? What's the right path at this point? Because now degrees apparently have not as much value. I won't say no value, but not as much value. And learning stuff on your own time doesn't necessarily work because you won't be able to validate your own experiences. That's happened to me when I told somebody, like, yes, I am aware of how to use Python, SQL, whatever the case is. I understand the concepts that you're referring to. I've done this when it comes to querying a database that's on my local computer and all that stuff. And there's like, where'd you learn this stuff? Or something along those lines, or maybe I just straight up told them. And they kind of got it together like, oh, you did this on your own. You did this on your own time. Correct. I've done, I built the sales database and queried the data and, illustrated the data with graphs in Excel and used MySQL and all that stuff. And they was like, oh, I thought you learned it under somebody else's roof. That's what I say. I refer to businesses as houses and like you're under somebody else's roof. That's what I mean when I say that. Who knows? I may talk about that as well. But, basically it wasn't good enough for them. I wasn't always that honest, but I was curious when I lived in Dallas and I noticed how shady the job market was. And I wasn't the only one that was having a hard time in Dallas in particular as someone in IT or trying to get into IT. I played around with it. Some people I lied to, some people I told the truth to. And some of the people I told the truth to, they're like, yeah, you need to learn this like from actual work experience and being part of actual corporate projects. And it's like, okay, so I have the skills. I can talk the talk. I may not be as great as another engineer, but I can demonstrate to you what I know. And the type of stuff that you're saying you need, I'm pretty sure I can do without much of an issue or, not as much correction. Like I'm not totally in the dark here. So you have an audience or one group of people telling us as their audience, have the skills, maybe some experience, but have the skills that you don't need a degree for. And that's really all you need. Then you got folks saying, well, you need a degree to, validate the experience, to validate the training really. And even then, a lot of corporations don't count that, internships included, they don't count it. So when it comes to getting into those major corporations that will, in your site, validate my training, my experience, everything I'm saying, and I didn't just Google everything or I didn't code for 5 minutes. Where do we go from here? How do we go about that process? And the only thing I see that makes sense at this juncture is we gotta rely on the government. Sad to say, especially with the results of the election. That's gonna be tough. But that's the only thing that makes sense. Like if you go into the military, they're going to train you in whatever it is you go into. If the value of the degree continues to decline, the only thing that would work is if you get a degree, preferably STEM related, depending on what you want to do, if not in general, and then you bypass being enlisted into whatever branch and you straight up commission as an officer. That's one way. You'll make more money out the gate. You'll technically be in command of those other people, but I would be careful with that. As someone that's a military brat, my mom's a vet, my dad's a vet, my uncle's a vet. A lot of people don't. Well, you know what? That's not even for this video. But that's one option. You can do that. You can get a degree for the sole purpose of getting into the military, commission as an officer, and make more money. Get into a specialized role that's like high paying. They'll train you. You can get skills and experience in industries and fields and tech that is on demand on the civilian side. You do your time for however long you want to, get out, and now you can transition into whatever you want to transition to, and will be able to demand more money up front. The only other thing that I'm kind of iffy on is still have to work for like Department of Energy, Department of Homeland Security without going into the Coast Guard or a government contractor. You have CACI, that's a big one in the area. You can go into the government sectors of Deloitte and Accenture, stuff like that. Like you could do that. But to get into those type of companies, not only is difficult, but to get in as an actual government employee, not just a contractor, but an actual government employee, is a long wait. One of my homeboys from college, he's he's good now. Like financially, he's good. He's a government employee. That's security. He likes what he does. It's no issue for him. but he regularly, when we check up on each other, he always mentions how, like, yeah, man, go and get a government job is good, but man, when I first started, it was like a year wait. But when I finally got that call and got in, I was good. But you're gonna have to wait a while, you know? So those are the only things I see. But either way, you're gonna have to get connected to the government, as part of their workforce, take the government for whatever they got and dip. If that's what you choose, unless you choose to make a career out of it, which there's nothing wrong with it, especially out of survival. We all have to survive. That's the only thing I'm seeing. And not only in manufacturing, but that's just the focus of the video, but in general, like the candles being burned at both ends. There's more of a picture being painted that we're running out of options. So where do we go from here? So I'll go ahead and leave that video off here, guys. What are your thoughts, opinions on the situation? Go ahead and leave that for me in the comment section below. What do you think we can do from this point on that will provide security and comfort for us? I'll see you later. Talk to you. Peace.